A dark evening in 1866. A lonely railroad track in Indiana. The thunder of an approaching steam locomotive breaks the silence. The clanking of iron wheels echoes through the night, steam hisses from the powerful engine, and the rhythmic chugging fills the air. But this was no ordinary train. It was an express, loaded with cash, gold, and bonds, carrying the fortunes of businesses and investors across America's expanding rail network. For years, railroads had symbolized progress, linking cities and industries, creating wealth, and transforming America. But with great prosperity came great risks. These trains carried small fortunes in locked safes, often guarded by nothing more than a handful of employees and a single armed messenger. No one had yet dared to challenge this system, until now. On this fateful night in 1866, a gang of ruthless outlaws lay in wait, hidden in the shadows of the Indiana countryside. Their target? The Ohio and Mississippi Express. Their mission? To pull off the first ever heist of a moving train, a crime so bold that it would change history forever. The Great Train Heist of 1866 was more than just a robbery, it was the birth of a new kind of crime. The daring tactics of the Reno Gang would set the stage for a wave of train robberies that would plague the American West for decades. But who were these men? How did they execute their daring plan? And what happened in the chaotic aftermath of their historic crime? Stay with us as we uncover the gripping story of the Reno Gang, the audacious heist that stunned a nation, and the brutal justice that awaited them. Before 1866, train travel was considered one of the safest and most efficient means of transportation in America. Railroads were the lifeblood of expansion, linking bustling cities with remote towns, carrying goods, mail, and money across vast distances. With every passing year, their reach grew, making travel and commerce faster and more reliable than ever before. But there was a problem. While banks were heavily fortified with steel vaults and armed guards, and stagecoaches had shotgun-wielding protectors, trains were different. They moved through desolate landscapes, often with little or no security. In many cases, these locomotives carried thousands of dollars in cash and gold, with only a single railway employee responsible for keeping it safe. For criminals, this was an irresistible opportunity. By the mid-19th century, crime in America was evolving. The lawlessness of the post-Civil War years had left many regions without strong police forces, and bandits roamed freely. Trains represented a new, untouched frontier for thieves, a moving target filled with wealth, yet completely unprepared for organized attacks. It was only a matter of time before someone realized just how vulnerable America's growing railway system truly was. The men who saw this first. The infamous Reno Gang. The Reno brothers were not ordinary criminals. They were pioneers of a new kind of crime, one that required planning, strategy, and execution on a level never seen before. And in 1866, they would become the first outlaws in American history to rob a moving train, forever altering the way law enforcement viewed railway security. But how did these brothers, once small-time crooks, rise to become the most feared criminals in the Midwest? The answer lies in the chaos and opportunity of post-war America. The Reno brothers, Frank, John, Simeon, and William, were born and raised in the rural town of Rockford, Indiana. They came from a hard-working family, but early on, they showed a different path. As young men, they became involved in theft, fraud, and counterfeiting, constantly testing the limits of the law. During the Civil War, the Reno brothers took full advantage of the chaos gripping the nation. While many young men enlisted to fight, the Renos saw an opportunity in the absence of law enforcement. They began by looting abandoned properties, cheating soldiers out of their pay, and engaging in horse theft, a crime considered especially heinous in the 19th century. But it wasn't enough. Small-time scams weren't going to make them rich, and they knew it. By 1864, the Renos had assembled a full-fledged gang of criminals, many of them former soldiers or drifters looking for easy money. This was no longer a group of petty thieves, this was an organized crime syndicate. At first, they targeted banks, stores, and post offices. Their robberies were bold, but still within the realm of traditional crime. That was about to change. As the gang's ambition grew, so did their need for bigger paydays. In the spring of 1866, the Renos set their sights on an entirely new kind of target, one that had never been successfully hit before. The railroads had always been considered untouchable. But the Renos were about to change that perception forever. Their plan? To stop a train in its tracks, break into the safe, and vanish into the night. It was risky, it was daring, but if it worked, it would make them rich beyond their wildest dreams. And so, on the night of October 6, 1866, America's first great train robbery was set into motion. On the evening of May 5, 1866, the Reno Gang prepared to carry out their daring plan. The target was the Ohio and Mississippi Railroad train, a transport that frequently carried valuable shipments of cash, gold, and bonds. The gang had spent weeks gathering intelligence, learning the train's schedule, its security measures, and identifying the perfect spot for their ambush. The location they chose was a secluded stretch of track near Seymour, Indiana. It was a strategic decision, far enough from prying eyes, yet close enough for a quick escape. The gang split into two groups. One team would board the train at the Seymour station, blending in with passengers. The second group positioned themselves near a pre-selected location where they would force the engineer to stop the train. As the train left the station, the Reno brothers and their men sprang into action. Using crude disguises, they moved swiftly, heading toward the express car where the safes were kept. Inside, the express messenger, an employee responsible for guarding the train's valuable cargo, had little time to react. One of the gang members pointed a gun at him, demanding he open the safe. The man hesitated. He knew that these safes were designed to withstand tampering. But before he could respond, one of the Renos struck him, knocking him unconscious. Without wasting time, the gang set to work, using sledgehammers and chisels to break into the safe. Sparks flew as metal clashed against metal, the sound barely drowned out by the noise of the moving train. As they struggled with the lock, one of the gang members noticed something: a smaller, secondary safe sitting next to the primary one. It was unsecured. Without hesitation, they grabbed it, knowing it contained a portion of the funds they sought. At the same time, another gang member rifled through stacks of mailbags, looking for any packages that might contain valuables. Outside, the second team was already in position. They signaled the engineer by waving lanterns, giving him the impression that there was an obstruction ahead. The startled crew reacted instantly, pulling the brakes. The train screeched to a stop in the dead of night, its whistle piercing the silence. With practiced efficiency, the gang members jumped off the train, carrying their stolen loot. They disappeared into the shadows, where horses were waiting nearby for their getaway. Within minutes, they were gone, vanishing into the darkness before authorities even realized what had happened. The Reno Gang had successfully pulled off the first ever moving train robbery in American history. But their boldness would not go unanswered. As dawn broke over Indiana, news of the daring train robbery spread like wildfire. Railroad officials and local law enforcement were stunned. Never before had a moving train been robbed in such a bold and coordinated manner. The Ohio and Mississippi Railroad immediately sent out telegrams alerting nearby towns and law enforcement agencies. The Reno Gang, meanwhile, had already split up, hiding in various safe houses across the region. They knew that the authorities would be searching for them, but they also believed they had planned their escape well enough to avoid capture. The gang had operated in secrecy, leaving little direct evidence behind, and their network of informants and corrupt officials ensured that local law enforcement had a difficult time tracking them down. However, the sheer audacity of the crime had attracted national attention. Railroad companies, outraged by the attack, put pressure on state and federal authorities to act swiftly. A significant reward was offered for any information leading to the capture of the robbers. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency, America's most feared private investigators, was brought in to lead the manhunt. The Pinkertons wasted no time. Under the leadership of Alan Pinkerton himself, the agency began gathering intelligence, interviewing witnesses, and monitoring known associates of the Reno Gang. They followed a trail of rumors and small leads, gradually narrowing down their search. Townspeople whispered about large amounts of money suddenly appearing in certain circles. It was only a matter of time before someone betrayed the gang. As the pressure mounted, the Reno brothers realized that they couldn't stay hidden forever. Some members of the gang began to panic. They debated whether to flee west or lay low until the situation cooled down. But the net was closing in. One by one, suspected gang members were arrested, interrogated, and either imprisoned or lynched by angry vigilante groups. The Reno brothers, however, remained elusive. Their knowledge of the region and their ability to bribe local officials kept them one step ahead. But their luck wouldn't last forever. By late 1867, the Reno Gang had become the most wanted criminals in America. The Pinkertons, backed by railroad companies and law enforcement agencies, were relentless in their pursuit. Towns across the Midwest were gripped with fear and excitement. Would the gang strike again, or would justice finally be served? Then, a major breakthrough occurred. A captured gang member, under intense interrogation, gave up crucial details about the Reno's hideouts and their movements. Acting on this information, Pinkerton agents and local sheriffs coordinated a series of raids. The first big arrest came when authorities tracked down and captured Frank Reno, one of the gang's leaders. Shortly after, other members, including Simeon Reno and Charlie Anderson, were also apprehended. The gang's days of freedom were rapidly coming to an end. But the people of Indiana were not willing to wait for a fair trial. The Reno Gang had terrorized the region, and many saw them as nothing more than ruthless criminals who had to be eliminated. A vigilante group, calling themselves the Jackson County Vigilance Committee, took matters into their own hands. In December 1868, a mob stormed the jail where the captured Reno Gang members were being held. Overpowering the guards, they dragged the outlaws into the streets. One by one, they were hanged from a tree, their bodies left swinging as a grim warning to other criminals. There was no trial, no chance for appeal, only swift and brutal frontier justice. The hanging of the Reno Gang marked the end of America's first organized train robbers. Their reign of terror had lasted only a few years, but their impact was profound. Railroads across the country implemented stricter security measures, and law enforcement agencies began working more closely with private detective firms like the Pinkertons to prevent similar crimes. In the years that followed, other outlaws, inspired by the Reno's actions, attempted their own train robberies. But few would match the sheer boldness of that fateful night in 1866, when the Reno Gang rewrote the rules of American crime, only to pay the ultimate price. The shock of the train heist spread quickly, and law enforcement mobilized with unprecedented urgency. The Pinkerton Detective Agency, already famed for tracking down notorious criminals, was hired to hunt the gang. Detectives scoured towns, questioned witnesses, and followed a trail of rumors and sightings. Meanwhile, newspapers fueled the public's fascination, turning the outlaws into legends. Despite their careful planning, the Reno Gang left behind crucial clues: witness accounts of their escape route, discarded supplies, and even a loose-lipped associate who let slip key details. The noose was tightening, and the law was closing in fast. As Pinkerton agents and local posses intensified their pursuit, cracks began to form in the gang's unity. Some members split off, trying to disappear into the frontier. Others sought refuge in criminal hideouts, but the law was relentless. One by one, members of the gang were captured or killed in shootouts. Eventually, the Reno brothers themselves were cornered. After a dramatic chase, they were arrested and placed in what was thought to be a secure jail. But the public had grown impatient. On a dark night, vigilantes stormed the jail, dragged the outlaws out, and lynched them in an act of frontier justice. The Reno Gang's downfall marked the end of an era. Their exploits inspired a wave of train robberies in the decades to come, but their brutal end served as a warning. Rail companies tightened security, armed guards became standard, and laws grew harsher. The legend of the Great Train Heist of 1866 still echoes in American history, a tale of ambition, crime, and the relentless pursuit of justice. The Wild West was changing, but stories like this would live on, captivating future generations.